Dr. Lucas Quinn had traveled across many worlds, but none as alien as this one. The planet Virelia was unlike anything he had ever seen. Its purple skies and vibrant landscapes were beautiful, yet harsh. The inhabitants, the Virelians, were a proud and ancient race, known for their advanced technology and deep connection with nature. But not all Virelians were well. The planet had been ravaged by war, and the effects were still felt. One such victim of this war was Kiora, a Virelian woman who had been left blind after a battle between warring factions. Lucas had come to Virelia as part of a mission for his research in xenobiology, studying alien ecosystems and life forms. However, when he came across Kiora, he knew his journey was about to take a turn. She had been lying in a small shelter, alone, with a sense of hopelessness in her eyes. Her once bright, vibrant blue skin was now dull, and her eyes were empty. She had been a soldier before the war, and now she was a victim of it. The pain of losing her sight was not just physical, but emotional. She had lost her sense of independence, and with it, her spirit seemed to wither. It wasn't the first time Lucas had seen suffering in the galaxy. As a doctor, he had spent years working with alien species, helping where he could. But Kiora's case was different. There was something in her eyes, a glimmer of hope that hadn't faded completely. It was as if she believed that something could change, even if she couldn't see it herself. Lucas approached her cautiously, speaking softly. "I can help you," he said, not fully knowing how he would do it. He had heard about the Virelian ability to heal, but he wasn't sure if any healing could restore the sight that was lost. Still, he couldn't ignore the desire to try. She was a victim of a war that she hadn't started, and her blindness was a constant reminder of that. Kiora's voice was soft and hesitant. "How?" she asked, not truly believing what he said. The desperation in her voice was impossible to ignore. "I'm a scientist," Lucas replied. "I studied many species and their abilities. I may be able to find a way to restore your sight. It might take time, but I believe it's possible." Kiora remained silent, unsure of what to make of this human who stood before her. She had never trusted humans. In her culture, they were seen as insignificant compared to the grandness of Virelia's ancient races. But there was something in Lucas' voice, a sincerity that caught her attention. She looked at him, sensing that perhaps, just perhaps, this human might be the one to restore the life she had lost. "What do you need from me?" she finally asked, her voice trembling with uncertainty. Lucas smiled gently. "Just trust me, Kiora. That's all." And so, their journey began. What Lucas didn't realize was that this small act of kindness would change not just Kiora's life, but the course of their entire future. The days that followed were filled with hard work and quiet determination. Lucas knew that restoring Kiora's sight wouldn't be easy, but he believed it was possible. He set up a small lab in the shelter where Kiora lived, using the tools and resources he had brought with him. The air was thick with the smell of strange plants and the hum of alien machinery. Despite the unfamiliar surroundings, Lucas felt a deep sense of purpose. This was more than just a scientific mission. It was a chance to change a life. Kiora spent most of her days in silence, trying to come to terms with the idea that she might be able to see again. At first, she was hesitant, unsure of whether she should trust Lucas. She had never allowed herself to get too close to anyone, especially a human. Her blindness had made her feel weak, a feeling she wasn't accustomed to. But as the days passed, Kiora found herself slowly opening up to Lucas. He didn't treat her as a patient or a victim. He treated her as an equal. She appreciated that more than she let on. As Lucas worked, he explained his process to her, using simple words she could understand. He told her about the technology he was using, a combination of human and alien techniques that had never been attempted before. He was using an implant that could connect directly to her optical nerves, allowing her brain to process light and images. It was risky, but Lucas believed it was the best chance Kiora had. Every evening, Lucas would sit beside her and run tests, taking measurements and gathering data. He watched her closely, noticing the way she would flinch at the slightest touch or move her head to catch the sounds of his voice. It was clear that her other senses had become sharper in the absence of her sight. He admired her strength, her quiet resilience. She never complained, never asked for pity. She simply accepted the help he was offering, as if she had already resigned herself to the idea that this was her last hope. Finally, after weeks of preparation, the device was ready. Lucas had done everything he could to ensure that the procedure would be as safe as possible. Kiora was nervous, but there was a part of her that couldn't deny the hope stirring inside her. The thought of seeing again, of truly experiencing the world around her, was almost too much to bear. What if it didn't work? What if she was still left in the dark? "Are you ready?" Lucas asked gently, his voice breaking through her thoughts. He held up the small device, its sleek, metallic surface gleaming under the shelter's dim lights. Kiora took a deep breath. "I'm ready," she said, her voice steady, but the uncertainty was still there. She had come this far, and now it was time to take the leap. Lucas carefully attached the device to the back of her head, just above her neck, where the nerve endings would be most effective. As the implant connected, Kiora tensed, the sensation strange and foreign. She closed her eyes instinctively, but Lucas whispered, "Trust me." After a moment, the device hummed to life. A soft light filled the air, and Kiora's body relaxed as she felt a strange warmth spreading through her vision. Her senses were alert, and a surge of hope filled her heart. She didn't know what to expect, but she felt something change. It was as if the world was waiting for her to open her eyes and see it once again. "You're doing great," Lucas said, his voice filled with encouragement. Kiora took another deep breath. With a steady hand, she opened her eyes. The world she had once known as a blur of shadows and outlines was now beginning to shift into clarity. Her eyes widened in disbelief. She could see. Kiora opened her eyes slowly, unsure of what to expect. The world around her had been nothing but darkness for so long that she had forgotten what it felt like to see. But now, as her eyelids lifted, something was different. The first thing she noticed was the light, soft and golden, spilling through the small window of the shelter. She blinked, the brightness overwhelming. But then everything started to come into focus. Shapes, colors, and shadows began to take form. It wasn't perfect, not yet, but it was more than she had hoped for. The walls of the shelter, the faded tapestries, the plants hanging from the ceiling, they all started to appear sharp, clear. She could see the textures of the objects around her, the patterns on the cloth, the way the light bounced off the surfaces. It was like waking up from a long, endless sleep, and she could finally see the world again. Kiora's breath caught in her throat. She looked at her hands, her fingers trembling as she touched her face, her arms, the small things she had forgotten about in the dark. The sensation was overwhelming, and tears began to well up in her eyes. She had never imagined this moment would come. To see again, to witness the world she had lost, felt like a dream. She wanted to believe it, but it seemed too unreal. Lucas watched her quietly, standing a few feet away, his heart pounding in his chest. He had been so focused on the science of the procedure that he hadn't fully understood what it would mean for Kiora. But now, seeing her reaction, he realized that this wasn't just about restoring sight. It was about giving her a new life, a new chance to experience the world she had been denied. Kiora slowly lifted her head, her eyes scanning the room, her gaze landing on him. Her face was a mixture of awe and disbelief. It's real," she whispered, her voice shaking with emotion. "I can see." After all this time, Lucas nodded, a small smile tugging at the corner of his lips. "Yes, Kiora, you can see." The words seemed so simple, but they carried so much weight. Kiora's hands fell to her lap as she looked around the room again, taking in the details. Her eyes moved to the window, where the bright light of the twin suns outside streamed in, casting shadows on the floor. For the first time in years, she saw the color of the sky. Purple, with swirling clouds of pink and orange. It was nothing like she had remembered, and yet it felt more beautiful than anything she had ever imagined. Kiora's gaze shifted to the garden outside the shelter. She could see the green of the plants, the gentle movement of the leaves in the breeze. It was a sight she had only dreamed of, a sight she never thought she'd have again. The world she had once known, lost to darkness, was now a vivid painting in front of her eyes. Tears finally spilled down her cheeks. It was too much. She had forgotten how beautiful everything was. The feeling of the sun on her face, the wind on her skin, the colors of life all around her. It was all so overwhelming. "Thank you," Kiora whispered, looking up at Lucas. "I never thought I would see again. I never thought anyone could help me, but you did." Lucas felt a lump in his throat as he stepped closer to her. "You did this, Kiora. You trusted me when you had every reason not to. You're the one who made this happen." Kiora smiled, a true, radiant smile that reached her eyes. "Maybe, but I could never have done this without you." Her voice cracked, full of emotion. For a moment, they both stood there, silently sharing the weight of the moment. Kiora had regained her sight, but she had also regained hope, hope that she wasn't alone, and that there was still a future for her. And Lucas realized that this was more than just a scientific achievement. It was a new beginning for both of them. In the days that followed, Kiora's life began to change in ways she hadn't expected. The first few moments after the procedure had been overwhelming. The world had come back to her in a flood of light, colors, and sensations, and she had barely been able to process it all. But now, as she adjusted to her new reality, she began to appreciate the smallest things, things she had once taken for granted before her blindness. Lucas was there every step of the way, watching over her and guiding her through the process of seeing again. He had made sure that she was comfortable with every new sensation, helping her ease into the experience of looking at the world without the barrier of darkness. There were times when she would simply sit by the window, watching the sunset over the horizon, mesmerized by the way the light danced across the sky. She could see the details now, the ripples in the water, the birds soaring above, and the endless beauty of the world. It was all so different from what she had imagined. But it wasn't just the sight that had changed for Kiora. Her relationship with Lucas had begun to shift, too. At first, he had been the scientist, the one who was here to help her, and nothing more. But as time passed, she began to see him differently. He wasn't just a human who had restored her sight. He was someone who genuinely cared about her, someone who had put his own life at risk to help her. In a world where trust was rare, especially between different species, this connection felt like a miracle. Lucas, for his part, found himself growing closer to Kiora as well. He had come to Virilia for a scientific mission, but helping Kiora had turned out to be something much more profound. He had never expected to form such a bond with her. In the beginning, he had seen her only as a subject for his research, a patient in need of his expertise. But now, as he watched her learn to navigate her world with her restored sight, he began to understand how much she had lost and how much she had gained. Kiora had become more than just someone he was helping. She had become his friend. He admired her strength and resilience, her ability to face every new challenge with courage, even when she felt afraid. He admired the way she had accepted her blindness with dignity, never once asking for sympathy. And now, as she explored her newfound sight, he couldn't help but feel proud of her. One evening, as they sat together under the stars, Lucas spoke up. "You're incredible, Kiora. You've come so far already." Kiora smiled softly, her eyes reflecting the light of the distant stars. "I didn't come this far alone," she said. "You helped me. You made this possible." Lucas shook his head, his gaze gentle. "You trusted me. That was the hardest part." Kiora's smile deepened. "Maybe, but you didn't give up on me. And now, I can see everything." Her voice trailed off as she looked up at the sky, the stars twinkling above them. It felt as if the universe itself was welcoming her back. Their bond was growing stronger each day. In the silence between them, there was no need for words. They understood each other now in ways that went beyond just language. There was a quiet understanding, a trust that had formed between them, and for the first time in a long time, Kiora didn't feel alone. She wasn't just a survivor of war. She was a woman with a future, one that she would share with Lucas, the human who had given her back her sight. As the days turned into weeks, the bond between them deepened, and they both began to realize that their connection was something that couldn't easily be explained. It was something that went beyond species, beyond expectations. It was something real, something that neither of them had seen coming. Word of Kiora's restored sight quickly spread across the galaxy, and with it came attention that neither Lucas nor Kiora had expected. What had been a small private medical breakthrough turned into a galactic issue. As a human, Lucas knew that his involvement in Virilia's affairs was already controversial, but now his work with Kiora was drawing attention from powerful forces. The Galactic Council. The council was made up of representatives from many different alien races, and it was their job to ensure the peace and balance of the galaxy. But what was good for one species wasn't always good for others, and the restoration of Kiora's sight had raised concerns among some of the more traditional factions. The procedure that Lucas had performed on Kiora was considered by many to be unnatural, a violation of their sacred laws. Some races believed that healing a species in such a way could throw off the natural order of the universe, and they feared that the ripple effects could lead to a greater disruption. One morning, as Lucas and Kiora sat together in the shelter, working through the day's routine, an official message arrived from the Galactic Council. The message was delivered in the form of a hologram, a tall figure in flowing robes, the emblem of the council glowing above its head. Lucas stood up, watching as the hologram flickered to life in front of him. "Dr. Lucas Quinn," the figure began, its voice calm but firm. "You have made a decision that could affect more than just your world. We have reviewed your work with the Virilian woman, Kiora. The procedure you have conducted on her, while impressive, is considered by some factions to be a grave mistake. The unnatural restoration of sight in a species so closely tied to their spiritual beliefs raises significant concerns." Lucas's heart sank. He had known this day might come, but hearing it from the council itself made it feel more real, more dangerous. "We, the Galactic Council, cannot allow further interference with the natural processes of other species," the figure continued. "Kiora's restoration may have been a gift to her, but it is also a challenge to the way things have always been. We demand that you cease your work and present yourself for questioning at once. Refusal to comply will result in actions being taken against you and your project." Kiora, sitting beside Lucas, stiffened. The weight of the message hung heavy in the air, and her joy at regaining her sight quickly turned to anxiety. "They want you to stop," she said, her voice trembling slightly. "They don't want this to happen for others. They're going to punish you." Lucas's mind raced. He had expected some kind of resistance, but he hadn't anticipated such a direct threat from the council. He had been trying to help Kiora, to give her a chance at a life she thought was lost forever. But now, it seemed that the very thing he had done for her was the reason they were in danger. "Kiora, listen," Lucas said, his voice steady despite the storm brewing inside him. "I didn't do this for the council. I did this for you. You deserve to see the world. You deserve to live your life, free from the shadows." "But they don't see it that way," Kiora said quietly, her eyes looking down at her hands. "To them, it's a violation. And now we're both in danger." Lucas paced back and forth, trying to think through the options. The Galactic Council was powerful, but he couldn't just give up now, not when Kiora had come so far. He knew that what he had done was right, but he also knew the political consequences could be disastrous. "We'll figure this out," Lucas said, turning back to Kiora, his face determined. "We have to. They can't take this away from you. I won't let them." The hologram from the Galactic Council flickered once more. "You have 3 days, Dr. Quinn. After that, we will act. This is your final warning." As the hologram disappeared, The room fell into silence. Lucas and Kiora were left alone, each grappling with the weight of what had just been said. The peaceful world they had shared, the hope they had built together, was now under threat. And yet, in the face of the unknown, Lucas knew one thing for sure: he would not back down. The days following the Galactic Council's warning were tense and filled with uncertainty. Lucas and Kiora spent most of their time inside the shelter, discussing their options and trying to come up with a plan. The threat of the Council was real, and the danger they now faced was something neither of them had expected. Kiora's restored sight had given her hope for a new life, but now it felt as though that hope was slipping away. Kiora could sense the change in Lucas. He was trying to stay strong, to keep a calm front, but she could see the worry in his eyes. He had always been focused on helping her, but now the stakes were higher. They weren't just dealing with the challenges of her blindness. Now, they were facing the power of the Galactic Council, an organization with resources and influence that stretched across the galaxy. Lucas had no idea what the Council might do if they didn't comply, but he knew it wouldn't be good. "I never imagined it would come to this," Lucas said one evening, his voice filled with frustration. "I thought I was just helping you, Kiora. I didn't think it would become a political issue." Kiora sat quietly across from him, her eyes scanning the room. Though the once familiar space felt different now. The walls, the furniture, even the soft lighting seemed to mock her, reminding her that her restored sight had come at a cost. She had wanted so badly to be able to see again, to experience the world with her own eyes. But now, every time she looked out the window, she saw not just the beauty of the world, but the looming threat of the Galactic Council. "You were helping me, Lucas," Kiora said softly. "You gave me back something I thought was lost forever. And for that, I will always be grateful. But I understand why they're upset. What you did, it's not something they would ever allow." "I didn't think about it like that," Lucas replied, shaking his head. "I just saw a chance to give you something back, a way to make your life better." Kiora reached out and placed her hand on his. "I know you didn't think about the consequences, but we can't ignore them now. If the Council is this upset, it's only going to get worse. They don't take kindly to being defied." Lucas nodded slowly, the weight of the situation sinking in. He had known from the beginning that helping Kiora would be risky, but he hadn't realized how much. He was now a target, not just for the Council, but for anyone who saw his actions as a threat to the order of the galaxy. "We have to leave," Lucas said suddenly, standing up. "I don't know how, but we can't stay here and wait for them to come after us. We need to find somewhere safe, somewhere they can't reach us." Kiora stood as well, her heart racing. "Where would we go, Lucas? Where would we be safe?" "I don't know yet," he admitted, his voice tense. "But we can't wait for the Council to make a move. We have to take control of this before it spirals out of our hands." The idea of leaving Virilia, of running from the consequences of their actions, weighed heavily on both of them. But neither of them saw another option. The Council was powerful, and their influence was far-reaching. If they stayed, they risked being captured or worse. If they ran, they might find a way to keep Kiora safe and to continue the work that had already started. As they packed their things, Kiora's heart was heavy with uncertainty. She had dreamed of seeing the world again, but now, that dream was tied to a life of constant danger and hiding. She had wanted peace, but it seemed that peace was slipping further and further away. But as she looked at Lucas, she knew one thing for sure: he was right. They couldn't wait. They had to leave. They had to fight for their future. And no matter what happened, she wouldn't face it alone. The decision to leave had been made. Lucas and Kiora packed quickly, gathering only the essentials. They knew they couldn't risk staying in one place for too long. The threat of the Galactic Council and the growing unrest among Kiora's people weighed heavily on them. But little did they know, their actions had already begun to spark something bigger. As they prepared to leave, a new challenge emerged. Word spread among the Virilians, and a faction of Kiora's people, those who opposed the human intervention in their world, began to rise. These Virilians saw Lucas's work as an unforgivable offense. They viewed his restoration of Kiora's site not as a gift, but as an act of defiance against their ancient traditions. They believed that no outsider, especially a human, should be allowed to alter the very essence of their species. One evening, as the two of them prepared to leave the shelter and head for their ship, a group of armed Virilians appeared at the entrance. Their eyes were cold, their expressions hard. They wore the dark, ceremonial robes of the rebel faction, a group that had grown stronger in recent years, opposing the more peaceful leadership of their race. The leader of the group, a tall and imposing figure named Zalrin, stepped forward, his gaze locked on Kiora. "You've betrayed your people, Kiora," Zalrin said, his voice sharp. "You allowed a human to heal you. You allowed him to break the laws of our kind. For that, you will be punished." Kiora took a step back, her heart racing. She had heard of Zalrin, a fierce rebel leader who believed in preserving their ancient ways, no matter the cost. He was not someone to reason with. Lucas stepped forward, trying to stay calm. "We didn't do anything wrong," he said, his voice firm. "I helped Kiora because she deserved a chance to live without darkness. What's so wrong with that?" Zalrin sneered. "You think you can come to our world and change things just because you have the power to do so. You've only created chaos. The Council won't let this pass, and neither will we." The rebels behind Zalrin tightened their grip on their weapons, preparing for a confrontation. Kiora's breath quickened, the fear of what was happening sinking in. This wasn't just about the Council anymore. This was about her own people turning against her for something she hadn't even asked for. They were ready to fight for their traditions, even if it meant forcing her back into the darkness. "We won't go back," Kiora said, her voice shaking with a mixture of fear and defiance. "I won't live in the dark again. Not for anyone. Not for you." Lucas placed a hand on her shoulder, a gesture of reassurance. He turned to face Zalrin. "We're leaving, and nothing you say will change that." The tension in the air was thick, like a storm about to break. Zalrin's eyes narrowed, and he gave a signal to his rebels. Without warning, they raised their weapons, aiming them at the two of them. But just as quickly, Kiora stepped forward, holding her hands up in surrender. "Stop," she called out, her voice commanding. "If there's one thing I've learned, it's that fighting will only destroy us. I may have broken the law, but I did it because I wanted to live. Can't you understand that?" For a moment, Zalrin hesitated, his anger flickering in his eyes. But then, something changed. His grip on his weapon loosened, and he gave a low, frustrated growl. "You think you're the only one who suffered. The galaxy isn't kind to those who break its rules, Kiora. And now, you're dragging this human into it." Kiora stood tall, her eyes locked on his. "If you want to fight for our traditions, Zalrin, then let them remain in the past. I'm moving forward, and so is Lucas. If you want to stop us, you'll have to kill us." The silence that followed was thick. The rebels shifted uncomfortably, uncertain of what to do. Zalrin's expression softened just slightly, but his words were still cold. "I'll let you go for now," he said, "but don't think for a second that this is over. The Council will deal with you soon enough." With that, the rebels turned and left, vanishing into the shadows. Kiora and Lucas stood in the doorway, their hearts pounding. They had escaped the immediate danger, but the conflict was far from over. The rebellion, the Galactic Council, and the threat of the unknown lay ahead. But for the first time in days, they felt a sense of relief. They were still alive, and they would continue to fight for their future together. The close call with the rebels left Lucas and Kiora shaken, but it also made one thing clear. Staying in Virilia was no longer an option. The Galactic Council was still a looming threat, and now the rebellion within Kiora's own people had escalated things even further. The Virilian rebels were determined to stop Kiora from living the life she had now, and Lucas knew the only way to protect her was to leave, fast. "We can't stay here," Lucas said as he packed their belongings into their small escape ship. He had worked quickly to prepare the ship, knowing that time was running out. The Galactic Council had given them a deadline, and the rebels would not give up until they were certain Kiora was brought back under their control. "We need to get as far away from this planet as possible." Kiora nodded, her face pale but determined. She still couldn't shake the images of the rebels' weapons pointed at them, their cold faces showing no mercy. But the thought of running, of leaving everything she had ever known, was almost as painful as the idea of being captured and forced to live in darkness again. Still, there was no other choice. Her sight, the one thing that had brought her so much joy, was now the very thing that put her in danger. "Where do we go, Lucas?" Kiora asked, her voice steady but filled with uncertainty. "Where can we hide?" Lucas paused, looking out the small viewport of their ship at the planet's horizon. The suns were setting, casting long shadows across the land. It was beautiful, but there was no time to admire the view. "There's a place," he said, "a planet on the outer edge of the galaxy. It's far from the Council's reach, and it's not heavily populated. It's the best shot we've got." Kiora swallowed, nodding slowly. "And what if they find us there?" "They might," Lucas admitted, "but it's our best chance. I'll keep working on ways to stay hidden. I promise, Kiora, we'll be safe. No one will hurt you again." The words were meant to reassure her, but Kiora could hear the doubt in his voice. Even Lucas didn't know what would happen next, but for now, it was the only plan they had. As they boarded the ship, Lucas activated the engine, and the small craft hummed to life. He guided it carefully out of the shelter and into the darkening sky, leaving the planet behind. Kiora watched Virilia disappear beneath them. The world she had known, the world that had once seemed so full of promise, now fading away. She could still remember the first time she had seen the landscape through her restored eyes. The colors, the shapes, the movement of life. It had been so beautiful, and yet it felt like a distant memory now. She didn't know when she would be able to return to that world, but she had to focus on the present. She had to stay alive, and for that, she needed to trust Lucas. Hours passed as they traveled through the vastness of space, the stars shining brightly outside their ship. Kiora couldn't help but feel a sense of wonder at the beauty of the universe, even in the midst of their escape. Despite the danger, she couldn't deny the thrill of seeing the stars again, of feeling free. Eventually, Lucas turned to her. "We're almost there," he said, his voice soft. Kiora looked at him, her heart heavy with gratitude. "Thank you, Lucas, for everything." He smiled, though it was tinged with worry. "We're in this together. We'll find a way to make it." As the ship entered the outer reaches of space, heading toward the distant planet, Kiora held on to that hope. For the first time in a long while, she allowed herself to believe that maybe, just maybe, there was a future for her and Lucas, one where they could live in peace, far from the danger that had hunted them both. The journey ahead was uncertain, but as they moved further from the dangers of Virilia, Kiora realized one thing. She wasn't alone anymore, and for the first time since she had lost her sight, she felt like she had something to fight for again. The journey through space was long and quiet, the stars outside the small ship a constant reminder of how far they had come from Virilia. Lucas and Kiora had spent the last few days in the cramped quarters, preparing for whatever came next. They had reached the outskirts of the galaxy, far beyond the reach of the Galactic Council, but Kiora's mind was still racing with the same question that had been with her since they left Virilia. Would they ever truly be safe? The rebel faction on Virilia, led by Zalrin, was still a threat. Even though they had managed to escape the immediate danger, Kiora knew that Zalrin's group wouldn't stop. They had made it clear that they wouldn't allow her to live freely, especially with the way she had broken their laws. Kiora understood their anger, but it didn't make the situation any easier. Lucas noticed Kiora's quiet mood as she stared out the window of their ship, watching the stars pass by. He had hoped that the distance between them and the planet would bring some peace, but it was clear that Kiora was still haunted by the events that had unfolded. "Are you okay?" Lucas asked gently, his voice breaking the silence. Kiora looked up at him, forcing a small smile. "I'm just thinking," she said, her voice tinged with worry. "We might have left Virilia, but I still feel like I'm running. I don't know what the Council will do, or if the rebels will come after us." Lucas walked over and sat beside her. "We're not running," he said, his voice firm but kind. "We're surviving. You've already been through so much, Kiora. I know it's hard, but we'll keep fighting, just like we've been doing." Kiora nodded, but the fear in her eyes didn't fade. "I never wanted any of this," she said softly. "I just wanted to see again. I never thought that it would cause so many problems." Lucas placed a reassuring hand on her shoulder. "I know, but you didn't cause the problems. The people who think they can control everything are the problem. We did the right thing. You deserve to live without fear, Kiora." She looked at him, her eyes filled with a mixture of sadness and gratitude. "Thank you, Lucas," she whispered, "for not giving up on me." Lucas smiled back at her. "I'm not going anywhere." As the hours passed, the silence between them grew more comfortable. Despite the danger they faced, there was a sense of peace in the ship. They were away from the conflict, away from the tension and fear. But Kiora knew this peace would be temporary. Eventually, the Galactic Council would catch up to them, and the rebels wouldn't let her go without a fight. Their ship was approaching a small, unnamed planet, far from the conflict that had consumed their lives. The planet was isolated, a place where few traveled, and it was the perfect place to hide for a while. Lucas had a contact there who could help them, someone who owed him a favor from years ago. They would lay low, regroup, and figure out what to do next. "We're almost there," Lucas said, breaking the silence. "It's not much, but it's a place where we can rest." Kiora nodded, her grip on her seat tightening as the planet grew closer. "I just hope it's enough." As they descended toward the planet's surface, both of them knew that this was only a temporary solution. But for the first time in a long time, Kiora allowed herself to hope. Maybe this was the beginning of a new chapter for both of them, a chance to live without fear, without running. But the road ahead would not be easy. They had faced challenges before, and they would face more in the future. But with each other, they knew they could survive. The small ship descended slowly toward the surface of the unnamed planet, the faint glow of its atmosphere visible through the viewport. Kiora sat in the seat beside Lucas, her heart pounding in her chest. This planet, a remote and largely uninhabited place, was their last hope for safety. It had no connection to the Galactic Council or the Virilian rebels, and it was far enough from any major space routes that they could hide without drawing attention. Lucas glanced over at Kiora, his eyes reflecting the same mixture of relief and caution. They had made it this far, but he knew that the real challenge was only beginning. The planet below them held promises of safety, but they couldn't afford to let their guard down. As the ship touched down on the rocky surface, the engines powered down, and a quiet stillness filled the air. "We're here," Lucas said softly, unstrapping his seatbelt and standing up. "Let's make sure everything is secure before we head out." Kiora followed him, her feet light as she moved toward the ship's exit. She hadn't realized just how tense her body had been until the ship landed. The fear, the constant feeling of being hunted, it all seemed to melt away for a moment as she stepped outside. The planet's surface was barren but beautiful in its own way. Dusty red hills stretched out in every direction, and the sky above was a pale shade of blue, dotted with wispy clouds. It was peaceful, a sharp contrast to the chaos they had left behind. Kiora took a deep breath, feeling the dry air fill her lungs. It wasn't perfect, but it was enough. For the first time in a long time, she felt like she could breathe again. "It's quiet," she said, her voice filled with awe. Lucas smiled. "Quiet is exactly what we need right now." They spent the next few hours securing the ship and setting up a small camp near the landing site. Lucas had a contact on this planet, a former ally from his research days, who had agreed to help them get settled. The man, Jarek, lived in a small settlement on the planet's outskirts. He was known for keeping to himself, and Lucas trusted him. With Jarek's help, they would be able to blend in and avoid detection for a while. As they set up their camp, Kiora couldn't help but feel a sense of unease. The silence of the planet was comforting, but it was also a reminder of how much had been lost. She had seen so much destruction, and although she was free from immediate danger, the threat of the Galactic Council and the rebels still loomed over them. She had no idea how long they could stay hidden, but for now, she had to focus on the present. "Lucas," Kiora said quietly, as she sat down on a rock near the campfire. "What happens now?" Lucas sat beside her, his face thoughtful. "We lay low. We wait. We make sure we're not found. And we keep moving forward. I know it's not easy, but we're safe here for now. We'll figure out the next steps when we have the time." Kiora nodded. Though the uncertainty still lingered, she was grateful to be free. But the world they were running from was never too far behind. "I've been thinking," Lucas continued. "You've done something incredible, Kiora. You got your sight back. You're stronger than you realize. And whatever happens next, we'll face it together." Kiora looked at him, her heart swelling with gratitude. She had come to trust him more than anyone else in her life. He had given her a second chance, not just with her sight, but with her life. For the first time, she allowed herself to smile, truly smile, knowing that she wasn't alone. "You're right," she said, her voice soft but filled with determination. "We'll face it together." As the stars began to twinkle in the darkening sky, the two of them sat in silence, the weight of the past few weeks still fresh in their minds, but a new sense of hope beginning to grow. They didn't know what the future held, but for the first time in a long time, they were ready to face it, whatever it might be. And with that, they knew this was just the beginning of a new chapter, one